Hey everyone, it's Mexie. Welcome to another video. Please excuse my appearance. I may begin sweating throughout the video because we're having a heat wave here in Toronto. It's very humid and I don't have air conditioning, so it's a balmy 28 degrees in my apartment. So today is going to be a discussion style video. It's going to be a little different than my typical lecture at you videos, and it'll be a comparison of UBI, universal basic income, and le salaire à vie, which is a concept by Bernard Friot. Excuse my ridiculous French accent. So I'm not an expert on le salaire à vie, but followers have told me that nobody is actually talking about this in English. So I wanted to, I guess, insert this into the discourse around basic income in English and maybe inspire people to think more about it and start discussions around how we might turn UBI, which is coming. It's an eventuality, so how might we turn that into something that could potentially be useful for revolutionary politics? So this video was inspired by my illustrious premier, hashtag not my premier, Doug Ford, the crack-dealing Trump-light nincompoop that a shocking number of people in Ontario thought would make a really great leader for our province. And he was elected because he is supposed to be the champion of the people, the champion of the little guy, which conservative platforms so often are. So I was gonna spend the intro kind of going over all of the Doug Ford cuts for the people, but I feel like I'd be talking about that for a really long time, and I'm not sure that people are that interested in Ontario politics. If you are, let me know. Maybe I'll just do an entire other video on the Doug Ford cuts for the people. But one thing he did for the little guy was to reduce the welfare increase by 1.5%, and went back on his promise to keep the basic income pilot going, ending it just before any actual results could be gleaned. For the people! He's actually being sued now by all the people who he lied to and then kicked off the program, who are now really destitute, including many conservative voters. Surprise, surprise. So the canceling of this study was significant because people the world over were waiting with bated breath for the results of this study, because there remain few studies that have been done on UBI, and of course the results of UBI will depend greatly on the specific way in which it is implemented. So unfortunately that data is now just removed from the debate. The debate in the mainstream continues to center around, well, how are we going to pay for it? Meanwhile, people vote for corporate tax cuts, or in the States, for approving a $717 billion defense budget. But UBI is inevitable. It's coming. There, I said it. The contradictions of capitalism will not allow it to continue reproducing itself without a lifeline like UBI. Capitalism reproduces itself only by creating an ever greater reserve army of labor, meaning people who are either unemployed, underemployed, or employed precariously, or in the informal economy that is largely superfluous to capital. There are many ways that capitalism ensures the growth of this reserve pool of labor, and you can check out my video on the topic to learn more about this, but one way is automation. Automation is a natural part of the growth of capitalism because in order to stay competitive, capitalists must be constantly revolutionizing their production process to make production as cheap as possible so that their profits continue to rise. Neoliberalism and free trade have also contributed greatly to this by pitting workers around the world into competition with one another. If workers strike or demand better working conditions in any way, then because capital can move and labor can't, it just incentivizes them to offshore production and get people in the third world to do it for very cheap, or to automate and just replace those workers entirely. So this is a complete global race to the bottom in terms of wages and working conditions. So this may be hyperbolic, but we're reaching a point where up to 50% of the global workforce could be replaced by automation in the next few decades. When people have no jobs, they can't purchase anything, and so the economy flops because you run into a problem of effective demand. If there's nobody to purchase all the goods that are being produced, then you run into the crisis of overaccumulation and consequent stagnation. So everyone who's asking, how are we going to afford UBI, is in for a real rude awakening when they realize that the only options we have are A, implement UBI to save capitalism, B, watch our entire economic system implode and take everyone down with it, including the rich, or C, let it burn and start the revolution to a luxury, fully automated communist utopia. What? Just saying. So the positives for revolutionary politics are few, although it really depends on exactly which form of UBI would be implemented. If it's a living wage, it could potentially disrupt some of the power that employers have over employees and perhaps give people the opportunity to pursue things that they are actually good at and passionate about, because they wouldn't be stuck scraping along working 2 to 3 jobs just trying to survive. They'll be able to afford education for their children, etc. So it has the potential to alleviate some of the worst pressures of capitalism, namely that it sees everyone as undeserving of food and shelter unless they are turning a profit for a capitalist. The best positive in my mind is that it could challenge the idea that a person's worth should be tied to their productive labor. It could potentially bring on this society-wide recognition or a shift in people's thinking to understand that meritocracy is bullshit. It does not work for the majority of people, increasingly more and more people. But despite being superfluous to capital, our fellow human beings still deserve food and water and shelter and love. Yay! So it has the potential to shift people's thinking around individualism and the labor market. But if it's not a living wage, and if it's not universal, and if it's given instead of all other social services like healthcare and etc., instead of on top of those services, then it has the potential to become pretty dystopian. So here we come to the negatives, and I am getting very sweaty, so I apologize. So like I said, it could be used as a means to privatize and individualize all other social provisioning. It bears mentioning that the architects of neoliberalism like Milton Friedman and Hayek were in favor of a UBI because they saw it as a way to lower people's benefits and maintain a large pool of low-wage workers. They called it a negative income tax, and they pushed for it because they thought that unemployment benefits were holding wages too high. Paul Cockshott explains that if you want to get somebody to work, you have to pay at least 50% more than the unemployment benefits in order to make it worth their while. So the neoliberal economist idea was, why don't we pay the benefit to everyone, and then you could pay half the unemployment benefit as a wage and you would still get people coming to work for that. Doing that would ensure that you always had a pool of people who were just desperate for low-wage work. So number 2, it could become just a subsidy for business that would remove any responsibility for companies to actually need to take care of their workers at all and make sure that they pay them well or provide them benefits or anything. Also, it's only for citizens. So that has the potential to marginalize and make immigrants and refugees even more vulnerable than they already are. Also, not every country in the world could afford implementing a UBI, especially if they're in the clutches of the World Bank or the IMF. They likely have to prioritize loan repayments over servicing their citizens in the slightest. And potentially the scariest part is, if no one is a worker anymore, let's say we're all on our UBIs and there's no work for us, we're all superfluous to capital, what kind of collective bargaining power does a mob of unemployed people have who are just sitting there getting money given to them by the government? If we're operating this still within a system of owners and laborers, then the people at the top can just say, you know, like, well, what are you complaining about? You're already getting your UBI, you're already getting your handouts. So I feel like that could make it harder for workers to organize because we're no longer workers, and they can just say, you know, well, we don't have any more money to give you, so And in terms of its potential to disrupt some of the power that the employer has over the employee, again, if we're doing this within a capitalist framework where there are two classes, the class of owners and the class of laborers, the capitalists and the government, I mean, they're not gonna actually make UBI a living wage. Like, they're not gonna make UBI a way that workers are gonna be actually able to just exit the workforce if they so choose. Like, they would have no incentive to do that. In fact, the complete opposite. So UBI under a capitalist framework has the potential to be really, really dystopian, because it's just a mob of people being fed money, just enough money, so that they can continue this system of consumption, consumption, consumption for no other reason other than consumption and waste, to keep the growth-oriented, profit-seeking system going. For no other reason. And ultimately, this will never solve the contradictions of capitalism. We'll still run into the contradictions of overaccumulation, stagnation, and the contradiction of environmental limits. I mean, if we're still just feeding people money in order that they can keep the consumption machine going in a for-profit, growth-oriented system, then that's never going to be sustainable. I mean, this is never going to be something that's going to be anything more than a band-aid to hold capitalism together as it crumbles and circles the drain. So now we come to le salaire à vie, even sweatier. And le salaire à vie attempts to address a lot of the problems with UBI, namely that it still operates within a capitalist, growth-oriented, exploitative system that doesn't actually challenge the contradictions of capitalism. Bernard Friot wants to challenge the use-value, exchange-value binary that exists under capitalism. So if I cleaned this apartment right now, for example, I would be producing a use value, not an exchange value, because it wouldn't contribute to the GDP, nobody would be profiting off of it. But the minute that somebody, like a company, contracts me out to do the exact same labor, producing the exact same use value, suddenly this has an exchange value. Suddenly this is productive labor because somebody is profiting off of my labor, and that could contribute to the GDP, etc. Friot believes that everyone produces valuable use values in their lives, and one's worth or one's salary and ability to live a life of dignity should not be based around the metric of exchange value, which is founded on exploitation and the whole contradictory capitalist framework that we just discussed. So UBI is given to you by the state, and it's financed through taxes, presumably taxing the middle and working classes more, because let's face it, I don't think they're going to be taxing the billionaires or cutting down on the defense budget. And with UBI, you get a basic income, but you have to supplement that with further work for a capitalist. Le salaire à vie proposes that the main, or perhaps only, income that people are getting is the salaire à vie. The salary would vary by age and whether or not you pursue higher qualifications. So at 18, you would start getting the base salary of, let's say, 1,500 euros per month. But if you get diplomas, etc., that improve your ability to do whatever job that you do, then you advance your salaire à vie. There's also a accumulation of experience points, which you get just from working. So as you get older, you'll hit thresholds where the salary will rise. I assume this is true whether or not you are working a job, or if you are not working a job, because presumably you're still producing use values in your life, whatever you are doing. So I believe that the points, even if you're not working a conventional job, you would still accumulate points, but probably if you are working a conventional job, then you would accumulate more points to advance your salary. And there would be a cap for how high any salary could go, for example, 6,000 euros per month. Unlike UBI, le salaire à vie would be financed by the total production of the country. So each company, whatever profits it makes above whatever it takes to merely keep running the business, like energy costs or raw material supply, is put into a central coffer, which is then distributed to all citizens. So bosses would no longer control the salaries of their workers, and also the power of landlords would be abolished. Friot sees this as a stepping stone towards post-capitalism, whatever that might look like. So I think it's a really compelling idea, and I like the idea of disrupting the use value, exchange value binary, and I like that it actually really does remove the power of employers, because employers or companies or whatever higher ups are no longer paying the employees, and so that directly removes their power, unlike UBI. And I think that would have implications for how companies are even run. I think they would just automatically become more like cooperatives, because effectively hierarchy would be abolished unless someone had, pursued education and achieved a certain qualification, and then people in the company voted that they should play a leadership role versus other people. So I think that it is a compelling idea in many ways, and it does address a lot of the problems with UBI, but I have some questions that I could have potentially figured out for myself if I had more time to dig into this, which I did not. So I would just like to bring up some things now that come up in my mind in hopes of maybe generating some more discussions around these things. My first question is, why are there still conventional companies turning a profit? I understand that this is supposed to be just a stepping stone towards post-capitalism, and that this is supposed to be something like a UBI that we implement while we're still in the framework of capitalism, but that is more radical than UBI. But profit itself is a quantifiable measure of exploitation. So I'm guessing that the companies or the employees are still not being paid the full value of their social labor, which allows there to be profit made in the first place. It's just that this profit is not being collected by CEOs or capitalists or investors. It's being redistributed to everyone, regardless of whether they have a conventional job or not. I'm also assuming that if we're implementing this in one country, and then we're still in a global economic system where the majority of other countries are capitalist, then presumably the companies in that one country where le salaire à vie is implemented could be selling to people all over the world, and so money could be coming in from everywhere. So it wouldn't matter necessarily what leveling the purchasing power of everyone in that one country would do to effective demand. But if we're still in this for-profit, growth-oriented system, I'm really not sure how long something like this could operate without or until it ran into similar large contradictions. Also, I would assume that companies operating in that country would have to relocalize production, because profiting off of the exploited labor of people elsewhere and then putting those profits towards distributing to everyone in this one country where le salaire à vie is implemented, I mean, employers wouldn't really have much of an incentive to do that, because the profits wouldn't be going to them anyway. They would still just be getting their regular salaire à vie. So this would be a really radical project that would revolutionize society in so many ways. So I guess I kind of feel like if we're gonna go that far, why wouldn't we also abolish money and profits and exploitation? Like, it's a pretty big stepping stone. Why wouldn't we just go the full way? I don't see how you can run a profit-oriented system that is not growth-oriented. Also, if this is only for citizens as well, then immigrants and refugees, etc., you'd have an entire population of people who have no other way of getting money. So they would just be hyper exploitable and marginalized as well. But if you only have one country in the world implementing this, then obviously, unless you said it was for citizens only, you would just have everyone the world over trying to flock into that country to get le salaire à vie. So I think it's an interesting idea, it's a compelling idea, it's something that we should be talking about and discussing here. I mean, I think this is what we need to do. I mean, we always talk, well, I always talk about how You know, it's great to study history, etc. We need to learn from the past, but at the same time, I don't think we're putting nearly half of our energy into thinking about creative solutions for right here, right now, this time and place, this political economy. And this is what we have to do. We have to have people come up with creative ideas. We have to have other people sit around and think about them and pose questions about them and critique them perhaps, and then we have to have other people come in and be like, oh, okay, well, in addressing this question you had or this critique you had, here's another idea, and just build on all of this together. Like, this is what we need to be doing. So I find this exciting. I'm glad that things like this are coming out and that people are trying to get creative. So yeah, I mean, UBI is coming, and it could be a dystopian nightmare like I just described. So I think that these are things we need to talk about and think about perhaps ways of turning these things into actual stepping stones and put them to use within revolutionary projects. So I would love to hear what you think. Please comment and continue the discussion below. Special thanks to my patrons now, and super special thanks to Classical Socialist, Thomas Butler, Tom Marino, and Will. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a monthly patron donor or toss me some change on PayPal Me. It really goes a long way. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in another video.